Today is Monday, May 8th, 2025, and this is Spring Office Hours Season 4, Episode 11, Spring Cloud with Ryan Baxter and Spencer Gibb. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun Carter. DaShaun, how are you?
I am wonderful. It is a great day to be a Spring developer, and I'm really excited about today's show. Spring Cloud is awesome, and we're going to get all into it, and it just keeps on getting better. This is the weird thing. How did we get here? How did we get to the point where we have all of these tools that we cannot take for granted because they are so mature? They've been around for so long. They've got such great development behind them, and they continue to get better. This is just, it's like Christmas again.
And we not only have one special guest, but we have two special guests today, and we'll get to them in a second. But yeah, I think we were at a customer event this week, and I think I shared one of the quotes on the Spring.io website from our good friend Paul Baker over at Netflix. And in that quote, he said, we go with Spring because we know that it's constantly being improved, it's constantly being maintained, and the team over on the Spring team that keeps putting out these amazing releases is awesome. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to two of them today.
It's going to be awesome.
What have you been up to?
I've been doing a little traveling. I went up to I went and watched the Timberwolves Golden State game. That was fun. It wasn't I was cheering for the Timberwolves because Golden State traded away my cousin, so I'm no longer a Golden State fan. But it was fun. Got to see a bunch of future Hall of Famers. Playing a game it was a fun game to watch. Even though the Timberwolves were behind, I think the entire game, it was still fun to watch.
You had some really good seats too.
I had great seats. Yeah, if you watched the game, you saw me. I was right behind the bench for the Golden State or from the Timberwolves, and it was just fun. The vibe. Minneapolis is an amazing city. It was beautiful weather. It was good times. Good times all the way around.
Awesome. I was doing some traveling as well. I was in Charleston this week for a customer event, which was pretty cool. First time in Charleston. I've been to a bunch of places in South Carolina. And South Carolina is so beautiful. I didn't realize how nice Charleston was, like in that downtown area. I got to walk around like King Street there, and it was like just really cool to see. So, and I think we were talking about this, like the really cool part about this job is we get to travel to certain places, but we're there for just like a little pocket. And so like I try to do as much as I can while I'm there. But I was definitely there going, oh man, I have to like bring the family back here and like spend some more time here because it was a lot of fun. So cool.
Yeah, good times traveling with the family. It makes me think, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could just like throw my family in a mobile
like an RV?
Just travel around and still work, right? But just be able to travel around.
Yeah, the problem with the RV, though, is like I'm going to Spring.io in Barcelona in a couple weeks. Like, it's not going to get there. So
my screen just froze. I got to hit a button here.
I hope it's not freezing on me. Fantastic. All right. Before we get started, I just want to remind you this is a live stream. We usually live stream every Monday from 1 to 2. This week, because of travel, we're on a different date. But you can always find out more on springofficehours.io. If you missed the live stream, you can go ahead and catch the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel. And then we also go ahead and turn this into a podcast. And you can get this wherever you get your podcasts. So if you are in the live stream, though, let us know where you're from. Say hi. We'd love to hear from you.
My mom and dad are always watching. They want to know where you're from. So we don't just want to hear from you. We want to hear where you're from. So my mom and dad are like, there was somebody from Dublin in the show today. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for
and if they got questions, what should they do?
Yeah. When you come to my house for dinner, if you leave hungry, that's your fault. If you're here, right, we're talking about Spring Cloud, but you got questions about anything. If you're here and you've got questions and you don't ask, that's your fault. Don't leave hungry.
Between the two very smart guests and then the two of us, I think we can probably answer some questions.
Yeah, these are the smart guys that I call when I can't answer them.
Yeah, exactly. I hit them up on GChat and say, hey, how do I do this? All right. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring our special guests to the stage, Mr. Spencer Gibb and Ryan Baxter. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Good, yes. How's it going?
All right, I'll start with you, Ryan. If we could just do a quick intro for anyone who doesn't know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here on the Spring team.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Baxter. I've been on the Spring team for about 8 years now. The entire time I've been on the Spring Cloud team, working alongside my good buddy here, Spencer. I've touched pretty much every SpringCloud project there is at this point, but primarily spend most of my time on SpringCloud config and SpringCloud circuit breaker and SpringCloud Kubernetes, but dabble across the board as well. So that's me.
Cool. All right. And Spencer?
My name is Spencer Gibb. I've been on the Spring team. It will be 11 years in just over a month. Yeah, I started SpringCloud with Dave Sire that 11 years ago, and spent that first year traveling the country in a large 45-foot fifth wheel RV. Speaking of RVs.
Wait, what? That's
What?
amazing.
So if we're going to
True
do
story.
this, DaShaun, we got to talk to Spencer first.
Right, he knows a thing or two. Again, when I don't have the answers, these are the guys I call.
And he has like 3 or 4 kids as well, you know, that he was
Sure.
in that RV with. So
There were four kids with us from 3 to, at that time, they were from 3 to 14.
Wow.
And there were six of us in the trailer. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
He's your man, DaShaun, to talk to you
Yep.
about that. So.
And so I've been on SpringCloud the whole time, and have led the project for I don't know how long, since Dave has wandered off into other bits of the Spring portfolio, as he's wont to do.
Yep.
Spring Boot before SpringCloud, all sorts of things that he has had his fingers into. So.
Cool. All right. Well, I think a really good place to start is I'm going to share the link to the project page. So spring.io project SpringCloud. First off, I want to thank you guys. DaShaun and I did like an overview of like SpringCloud, what it is, like what are all the different projects in it, like when do you kind of reach for this stuff. And they included that video of the Spring Office Hours on the SpringCloud page. So if you want to watch that replay, you can go ahead and check that out. But for those who don't want to leave the live stream right now, can you just talk about SpringCloud kind of like at a high level abstraction? Like what is it there for? What kind of problems is it solving for?
That's a really, really good question. So if you look at the different parts of the Spring portfolio, you have Framework, which, was originally kind of like a better way to build Java enterprise applications, right? Spring Boot came along just a year before SpringCloud, and this was how do you manage a process with Spring, right? So Spring Boot is the single process thing that comes up. And then SpringCloud, in essence, was how do you handle multiple processes? Right, the name cloud came at the time of the cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of them have their thing. And a lot of what was originally in it came from Netflix OSS in their journey on AWS specifically. And so we had things like, of course, Eureka, which is still a part of SpringCloud, service registration discovery. We had Ribbon, which was load balancing. We had Zool, which was your API gateway, and other things like that. And so for distributed systems, for common problems, SpringCloud was our target.
I like the way you explained it.
Yeah.
Spring Boot being, hey, how do you handle a process? SpringCloud, how do you handle a bunch of them? I like that metaphor, and I think I'm going to use that from now on.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, common problems. So like, I know I want to take my application to the cloud. That could be the first step, but then, hey, you're going to run into a lot of these common patterns or problems that you have to solve for. And so if you go over to the SpringCloud project, you'll see a whole bunch of like sub-projects on the side there. And you may not use all of them, but there are certain types of problems that come up, like SpringCloud config. Ryan, what is that at like a high level? What is that solving for?
Yeah, so it's all about externalizing your configuration from your application, right? Which is a big problem to solve when you're talking about doing things in the cloud. Lots of times you need to tweak configuration of the application without necessarily wanting to restart or redeploy that application. So SpringCloud config allows you to do that. And it's basically kind of an abstraction between some kind of back-end repository thing, right? So you could store your configuration in multiple different places, whether it's Git or a database or something like Vault or AWS S3 buckets, or however you really want to put it, and then SpringCloud Config takes the configuration from those locations and serves it up to the application when it needs it in a format that the Spring Boot understands. And so it supports things like encryption, decryption, all that fun stuff. You have sensitive, configuration, stuff like that. So that's really what SpringCloud Config is about.
And this is something you can get started with even if you're just launching like a single app, right? Like, hey, I may eventually get to like 10 instances of this app or distributed all over the world. But even if I'm just starting with a single app, it's probably a good idea if I'm pushing this to the cloud to use something like SpringCloud Config, kind of preparing me for the future, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can start with a single app. It doesn't need to be this, large scale Netflix scale application. It's just, you can start with a single application. There's lots of great features in it that are beneficial even for a single application running in the cloud. And one of the things I didn't mention is the ability to refresh the application's configuration. If you change, like make a change to a configuration file in Git, we have webhooks so that Git will notify the config server the configuration change for this application. Then the config server will tell the application that it changed, and it can go ahead and refresh this configuration without having to restart the application.
That's big. So we're not bringing down the entire application to change some configuration. And
right.
Yeah, it may not seem like a big deal, but your customers don't want to see a 500 error or something's down, right? Just because you want to make a configuration change. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's useful for a certain class of configuration, like logging levels or feature flags, or you've seen. So the backstory is that actually came out of talking to Netflix. They have a system like this. It was never open source, and so Dave was like, I want this feature, and so that was why we created. Typically, Spring doesn't have servers that run, right? So this was a kind of a unique thing out of all of Spring. But
the thing is, it solves, I guess, developers of a certain age know the pain of, hey, my app, it works on my machine. How come when I send this jar file to this other environment, how come it's not working? Some apps of a certain age, remember, or some places had this pattern of, oh, here's all my properties. I'm going to open up the jar file. I'm going to put those properties in, and then I'm going to move the jar file to the next environment. And that today, at a certain point, that was like, okay, that makes sense. I see what you're doing. But also in a lot of places, that was a manual process. It was a human doing that, unzip the jar, put in the new properties, and it was hidden from everybody else in the organization. Just the idea that I can have configuration for all my different environments in one spot, in like a GitHub repository, that alone, that visibility alone makes such a big difference. It is such a mind-blowing, we take it for granted now, that we have this really easy way of moving our configuration into a centralized place, and we can make changes. We can have an audit trail of those code changes, and I can deliver it no matter what environment it is. My application is going to get the right properties for that environment. Humans out of the mix.
And I love something you said there is that you were working with one of our customers at the time, Netflix, and just to kind of peek behind the scenes, this is something we do a lot. The Spring team, listening to the customers. Like I said, we were out at a customer this week. We are constantly taking feedback on this stuff. So don't take that for granted. If you have an issue, raise it. If you have questions on how something should work, the team is listening and responding to that. And that's how these products get better. So please make sure you get those in.
While we're talking about SpringCloud Config, here's a question that's right up your alley. Question: how does SpringCloud Config compare with Kubernetes config maps and secrets, specifically versus Go apps using env vars or direct K8s APIs? We'll ignore the last part of that question. SpringCloud Config and the versus config maps.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. You can choose to use one or the other, right? This is one of the great things about Spring is the choice is yours, right? If If you want to use config maps and secrets directly on Kubernetes when you're running your Spring apps, you can do that. You can mount them as volumes and use Spring config import to import them, those properties into your application. That's perfectly valid. It works perfectly well. It's a great solution. But you can also deploy SpringCloud config on Kubernetes. In fact, in SpringCloud Kubernetes, we have a Docker image that you can actually run that will run the config server on Kubernetes. And it also will, if you want to, use config maps and secrets as environment repositories for the config server. So you could layer, because a lot of people have configuration stored both in config maps and secrets, but also maybe in a Git repository or in AWS S3 buckets. So you could start to make, and actually is one of the things we're going to talk about in the release coming up, but you can make composite configurations that are made up of both Git repositories, config maps, secrets, AWS S3 repositories, and Git pull configuration from all of those places and serve them up through the config server.
I saw that in the release notes. I saw this using an S3 stored YAML and now the way that you just explained it, where I can have a composite pulling from all of these different backing stores. All delivered through SpringCloud config server.
Yep.
When I read the release notes, it didn't click, but now it clicks.
Yeah.
That opens a lot of doors. That opens a lot of interesting use cases. That is
because we see a lot of people who have like for example, when we talk about a platform, right, in like Kubernetes that has ways of storing configuration on the platform, right? Maybe you have configuration that's specific to that platform in config maps and secrets, but other stuff that's more general that might be spread across multiple different cloud platforms in a Git repo or in AWS S3 buckets or whatever. So it allows you to keep configuration. You can organize your configuration however you please, right?
Yeah.
But it opens up a lot of doors in that way.
And this is a question. Go ahead.
Rarely is an application in a homogeneous environment. Like, we only have apps running on Kubernetes. If you're lucky and you only have one platform to deal with, great, you can use all the native things. But we rarely see that, right? Typically, enterprises have lots of different things, and the nice thing about using something external is that you can have a common place for all those things, not just the one platform. So that's one of the nice things about even things like Eureka for service discovery, right? Because it'll work across all those platforms.
And that you kind of touch into this next question, like, hey, basically it's like, how do we decide? Should we use config maps or SpringCloud config? The thing that I like is that I can use SpringCloud config server whether I'm in a Kubernetes environment or not. I can have all of my config in one spot, whether I'm on the mainframe, I'm on the edge. I can deliver it all through one spot. And those configs now, it can be a composite backend. I can have secrets being delivered there. I can have config maps being delivered there. I can have other things. This is awesome. But yeah, when do you decide? I know my preference.
As far as deciding, kind of, when to use what, we don't really have any prescription. Yeah, we don't have any, solid, advice as to, because it depends on the business use case, your organization, policies that they may have. All this different stuff comes into play when we start talking about, well, where do I store this, or what do I use here, or, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard for us to give, concrete advice. They all work, but it's just really up to you and what works best for your organization, business use cases.
The two most famous words in computer programming are "it depends."
It depends, yeah.
And going back to DaShaun, what is SpringCloud? The other phrase that I would use are abstractions over distributed things, right? So we have config server, and Ryan has talked about all the different things that it connects to, but we also have that with service discovery, right? Whether that's Eureka or Console or Zookeeper, or we have you can deploy it on Kubernetes and it can use as a Kubernetes controller, right? So it can be Kubernetes, the circuit breaker, all the things that we don't use native APIs for those. We have abstractions for them so that you can pick which one. early on when I was doing service discovery talks, they're like, which one should I use? And I was like, it's like me telling you which database you should use. And that answer, right? It depends, because Eureka is eventually consistent. They built it for scale, right? Like there are 30-second timeouts at various places in the system. And so you might not see a new instance for up to 90 seconds. But console, for example, you can configure to be much more consistent. So if you want them immediately, you can do that. You could also use console as a configuration store, right? Because it has properties, right? So it kind of depends on your needs as to what parts of SpringCloud you should use.
It's crazy because it seems like such a cop-out answer, but after you've been doing this long enough, you realize that there are pros and cons to every decision you make, and it's really about like, what are the requirements in your system? So you have to make sure you kind of really lay those out before you're building something like this, and then that it depends becomes an easy answer, right? Because you can look at the pros and cons of each of these things and go, okay, that is more important to me. I need to go ahead and pick that one.
I mean, and back to like the original microservices talks, you must be this tall to do it. Like before you even get to us, should you even be considering us? And I've been having some conversations with your teammate Cora, like even if a modulith is the default that you should start with, are there things from SpringCloud that you could use even in that? Yes, the answer is yes, there are, right?
Yeah.
Config is being one of them, and other things like a circuit breaker. If you're making a call to a third-party system, how do you protect from failure there, right? Like, it's not always a cut and dry answer what you use. So
I'm going to toss kind of a softball because I know other people may be thinking of this, but there are all these different places and locations that we could be pulling configuration from. I'm pretty sure there's like an actuator endpoint that kind of tells us where these configs are coming from. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you hit the /env actuator endpoint, it will give you what the configuration looks like for that application. And that includes everything from configuration that's coming from the config server to local YAML or properties files to system properties, environment variables, etc. So
and I think
that'll give you kind of a global picture of everything.
And I think that's so important because I remember when I got started with boot, like there's this order of precedence, like here's where we load configuration from. And I'd always go back to the documentation and go, which one is taking precedence here? And now that's why, DaShaun and I, when we kind of build apps on live streams and stuff, we say the two things you should include right away are the actuator and the developer tools, because like they're just going to be valuable at some point. And like knowing where that configuration is coming from just makes it easier. You don't have to go look at documentation and it'll tell you right there, like this is coming from this. And it shows you like this file and this line and this, like it's very specific on where it's coming from. So
and back to DaShaun, to my original, like what is SpringCloud? Spring Framework provides the environment abstraction. One of the best things about Framework is you get this little class called environment that you can get stuff from. Spring Boot takes that to the process level and allows you external configuration that populates the environment. That list of things that Ryan was just talking about are property sources, right?
Yep.
And then SpringCloud takes that to let's get your configuration from some remote location, not just local to that process. And so those are the big differences between those three mechanisms.
Yeah, Eric, he had a long list of thoughts, but bottom line is like, hey, boy, it'd be sure cool if there's a simple file on S3. You're in the right place. You're in the right place, because guess what? In this new RC1, this is one of the tickets, one of the features that's been added is you can have your config stored in an S3 bucket on AWS. But yeah, this external resource that can be fed to your applications. That's it. That's why we're here. So yeah, just nice little bow on that one.
So typically the projects that I've worked on in the past use like a Git repository for the configuration. There's now an S3 bucket feature coming. What are like the other places we can pull from?
Yeah, so S3 buckets are there. You could use any JDBC database, HashiCorp Vault. Git, SVN. I'm sure I'm missing some other ones off the top of my head. What was I missing there, Spencer? I'll look real quick.
We don't need the whole list. That's all right.
And then Kubernetes config maps.
Yep.
Yeah. So
the IaaS
That's awesome.
providers have implementations so that you can get from like AWS Parameter Store and Secret Store or Google, what the equivalents from the different service providers. So they all have that. Yeah.
Someone, Eric
Hub.
just asked in the comments, he said, yes, link to example. I would say check out the SpringCloud 2025 RC1 release. There's a blog post on the spring.io blog. I am showing that in the live stream here, but I will make sure we get that into the release notes for the podcast as well. So go ahead and check that out.
So anywhere that you could do a webhook, there's a module config server that specifically takes webhooks and then can send messages to refresh. So basically a webhook system to trigger refreshes.
Yeah.
That's how GitHub works. You put a webhook for a change and it will hit your config server and then send messages.
The other thing I was going to say quickly about the backends is that it's all just an interface. So like you can literally write your own backend connection too. So you just implement this one interface and create a bean for it, and it will pull from there.
You could have a Redis backend, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Makes
we've
DaShaun
seen that. We've seen that, right? We've seen that. I remember even being confused. It's like, why would you do that? And they could, and it was on the menu. It was available, and it made their system simpler. So we've seen that. This is awesome.
Spencer, one thing I wanted to talk to you about today was SpringCloud Gateway. I know something near and dear to your heart. Just for a little bit of a backstory, SpringCloud Gateway was originally written in Webflux because it made sense. Wasn't blocking. If we're sending requests out to other services, we don't want to block those. As you've stated in the past, one of the highly projects that everybody was interested in was an MVC version of that. So since we got virtual threads, that made a lot of sense, and now we're not blocking, and we have the MVC version of that. How's that been going?
Great. I think I still see issues like we've been So originally there was Zool, right? And for the Ghostbuster fans out there, right? This was a Netflix open source app, and then they wanted to do a version 2 of it, and I was in a conference in Boulder, Colorado, and when they released it, and long story short, I was like, I think we could do better, make it a better experience for developers, and that's where that came from. And it was built alongside Webflux. It wasn't even called Webflux when I did my proof of concept yet. And so it came out, and then, but yes, servlet users now were missing, and then we've created the servlet version that has, most of the features of the Webflux version. In fact, one of the things in 2025.0 SpringCloud is a naming update so that we can consistently talk about. There are actually 4 variants of the gateway. 2 are server variants, which is what most people know, and then there are 2 proxy exchange variants, one each for Webflux and WebMVC. So the names of the starters, there are new starters: SpringCloud Gateway Server Webflux, SpringCloud Gateway Server WebMVC, and then the other 2 are what we call proxy exchange. These are lightweight things that basically add something that you can pass in a parameter to a controller, Webflux or WebMVC, to help you make requests and do your kind of own thing. And so specifically the Webflux server and the WebMVC server is what we're going to call them now.
Interesting. So given that, in my head, I was asking, like, what's the difference between the server and the proxy exchange? But then your explanation made me think, so is proxy exchange maybe what I want to use if I'm building a Spring modulith. If I want to have things routed inside of my modulith, I might use a proxy exchange.
Not necessarily. You
Question?
can
Okay.
also embed the server into any. It's just the servers are just Spring Boot applications, but they are handled at the routing level, right? So they make paths available on your application. The proxy exchange does not. The controllers control the paths, and then these just help to make downstream requests and proxy them back through.
Okay. Thank you for that. That clarified things for me.
So, for example, if you wanted to do, one of the common things we get asked for is like requests to multiple different services and then combine them, right? And so I would say use the proxy exchange to build that. But if you have a gateway, you might forward through that local controller to do that little bit of work manually. So they can be used together even.
Cool. I got a question here. GraphQL Federation stitching in SpringCloud Gateway.
Great question.
It's funny you bring this up. Spencer and I were like, I can't even remember where we were. Maybe we were in Detroit like a year or two ago talking about this. But since then, the GraphQL, Spring for GraphQL project has now supported Federation. I haven't been able to dive into that lately. I know they have some examples that use like Apollo Federation, but I believe they use their own like Apollo server. Is there a way to use GraphQL Federation with SpringCloud Gateway?
Not right now.
I didn't think so. But there is a way. So if you're interested in that, check out the Spring for GraphQL examples. There is a Federation example there, and they kind of walk you through that. I haven't actually run it myself, but I've seen that example.
It would make a lot of sense. I know when Rawson was in conversations with the GraphQL for Java folks, they were like, Federation is really, really hard.
Yes.
It would make a lot of sense to have like your graph, you come into Gateway, it's the entry point, and then different bits of the queries go off to the right places.
Cool. Something else I want to talk about from a gateway level. This is kind of forward-looking, but Spring Framework 7, Spring Boot 4 come out later this year. One of the things Spring Framework 7 is adding is API versioning. This makes it a lot easier to version like our REST APIs, which was not a lot of fun in the past. I'm guessing this is going to play well with SpringCloud Gateway. I mean, this seems like a perfect match.
I got a Rawson from the framework team who developed this feature, came to me very early on. It's like, hey, what would this be interesting? And I was like, yes, it would. The way, so for those not familiar with Gateway, you configure routes. Routes have predicates, right? How do I match a particular route? And then they have 0 or more filters that might change the request or response. Immediately, I was like, this could be a predicate, right? Like version, and it will support, one of the things that the versioning support adds is ranges. So you could say, for example, 1.2 plus. So 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So it will support those kind of range things. And we will use all the plumbing in the back end to do this in Gateway. And then the other thing was an idea that Ryan came up with is, and it will be, so is in SpringCloud Load Balancer to filter based on the incoming version requested, right? So route me to version 2 or route me to version 1.5 of this service automatically, right? Without.
Yeah.
So those are a couple places we're looking at.
And I believe the versioning will handle, it's not just like a path variable. It can handle like headers or however we want to like change the version. You'll kind of pick it up in Gateway and send it in the right place.
Yeah, it can handle paths, headers, request parameters, whatever or any combination of them, right? You can do that. Yep.
Cool.
Not not just semantic versioning, which is the default. You can plug
Yep.
your own version schemes into it as well. Like any good Spring Framework thing, you can plug
Yeah.
plug in.
Well, I know that this is always a big pain for developers working on REST APIs, so I'm interested to hear some feedback from the community on that. That is, I believe, already in the RCs for Spring Framework. So if you're interested in playing around with that now, go ahead and grab those bits. Again, that's not far away. November is well, it's what, 6 months away. So start getting your hands on that now and get prepared to update. So.
We had a question back here about event-driven architectures. And we have this bucket of projects, SpringCloud Stream. Are those related at all?
Yep.
Do we have anything in SpringCloud that's for event-driven architecture?
Yep. So the combination of SpringCloud Stream and SpringCloud Function are the answer to the event-driven. In the old days, these would have been a message-driven bean, right, in the EJB world, right? So message-driven microservices is what we called them originally, and in fact, those are the new features in the new version of SpringCloud Gateway that's coming out this month. So,
oh, nice.
So yes.
Go on.
So SpringCloud Stream is a binder framework. It will bind two different message technologies, Kafka, RabbitMQ. Again, all the IaaS versions, they have binders for all those different things. SpringCloud Function is the front end to that. That's how you program just with functions, consumers, or producers.
Suppliers.
Yeah, suppliers. And so the idea that I had from looking at an old, like 6 or 7 year old, what could we do in Spring Cloud thing? And it was like messaging and gateway. It's actually been requested quite a bit. Lots of people have this. And so now it was like, okay, well, we have SpringCloud Stream, we have SpringCloud Function, and SpringCloud Gateway has abstractions to allow different types of URIs to be configured for a route, right? Not just an HTTPS URI. Like, could I plug this in? Could we make this happen? And so then probably the biggest new feature in Gateway this release is support for an FN URI type for functions, or stream. You can connect directly to SpringCloud Stream binding and do messaging through Gateway directly. So HTTP to whatever message broker you're looking for.
Man,
and the modulith, is event, like the decoupling is through events, right? And then there's external, you can externalize those events. And if you have a modulith and you want to now, hey, I want this piece needs to scale and I want to separate it out, yes, now you can do it with the external messaging, not just the internal eventing of Spring.
Speaking of new things in Spring Framework 7, there is something around messaging as well. So kind of following suit of the REST template and the JDBC template, we introduced kind of new clients. So the REST client is kind of the successor to the REST template. The JDBC client, the successor to the JDBC template, gives you this nice fluent API, an easy to understand API. In Spring Framework 7, we're getting a modern alternative to both the JMS template and the JMS messaging template in the form of the JMS client. So following to it, that's going to be nice, kind of clean up the API. Again, I love working with like the REST client. It's so much easier when I get a client and I hit dot, like I'm not confused anymore. I know exactly like what methods are available to me. So if you're interested, again, Spring Framework 7 coming up in November, take a look at the JMS client. Yeah,
and the REST client is what the MVC gateway uses to make requests. So
nice. Yeah. This is also where some like understanding these things comes into play, because if I've been playing around with a lot of like AI tools lately, just to kind of like see where they are. And I would like use something like Windsurf and say, hey, write me an application that connects to this like JSON placeholder service and gets a list of to-dos. And it always uses the REST template because everything is like kind of trained on that on the internet, right? So I have to be like very specific and say, nope, please use the REST client because I don't want to use the REST template anymore.
I just want to give you a shout out. I've watched that video of yours, Dan, at least twice. Like I've shared it. You did a really good job in that video.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I love nerding out over a lot of these AI tools. So yeah, I keep telling people too, we said this before, DaShaun, like everybody gets scared of like AI taking over everything. And I'm like, just these tools are great, but they're tools. And like, if you know nothing about photography and I give you a $2,000 camera, you're still going to shoot normal pictures with it, right? Like a photographer with an iPhone is going to shoot better pictures because they understand things like aperture and exposure and things like that. So like as a developer with experience, these tools just make you more productive. Handing somebody these tools that has no experience of development is just going to go, yes, use the REST template and nothing wrong with the REST template, but there are better ways to do things. So it's been a lot of fun kind of going through that.
Spencer, I think you're answering Eric's question here where he's talking like, hey, it says S3 is at AWS only. Can we do it on Azure? And then you replied like, yeah, it's S3. If you're speaking S3, this should work.
Yeah, that's how we test it. We point it to the local stack. So,
right. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I was at DevOps Greece last month and went to a talk by someone from Google, and he was talking about AI, and it was the first talk that I had heard that was like realistic. And he's like, someone is not going to, you're not going to be replaced as a developer by AI, right? The large percentage of us are not. What you might be replaced by is someone a developer using AI, right? So just like you said, as a tool, right? Like, if we were using the electric drills and saws and everything, those are just the new versions of tools, right? Better technology to use to do the thing you're building, right?
You got to be willing to adapt. If you're willing to adapt in almost any industry, I think you're going to be okay. So
yeah, I kind of look at it. I kind of look at it like AI, kind of like the pair, and when you're pair programming with someone, like it's the thing that can like look over your shoulder and see like, oh, you made like maybe a mistake here, right?
Yes.
But like it might say, oh, try to use REST template, but they're like, no, I don't want to use that. Like I have something in my head,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I kind of look at
When you say pair programming, I now think of it like this. I got that from Dan Basquette. And every time I hear it, because pivotal labs like this experience, we have, there's a big part of our culture that is really heavy in pair programming and all the benefits of that. And now it just looks a little bit different. But a lot of those concepts and benefits, you can get those without having a human pair. You can have an AI pair. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Every time I hear that now, it's in my head.
In this pair, remember, you are the pilot, not the passenger.
Yeah. Right.
Yes,
You're the one driving the keyboard. Yep.
Cool. So anything else been happening in SpringCloud? I know we haven't talked in a while, so I'm just curious, like where have you guys been kind of focusing your efforts? I
mean, the gateway features with stream and function. So SpringCloud Function has a web module, but if you want to be more complex, the advice will now be use the gateway integration, both WebFlux and WebMVC. It works on both. I know, Ryan, we were.
Yeah. I was just going to mention that came up this week. The SpringCloud Function, really interesting project. I've built a lot of like cool like little functions with that and published them to like AWS Lambda and stuff. And somebody was talking to me about it, and they're like, yeah, I like it, but I don't want to like have to like test for like AWS locally. And I had to stop them and say, you don't have to. Like the great thing about SpringCloud Function is you write your functions agnostic to wherever you're going to deploy them to. And because of the web feature, you can actually run them locally and just hit an endpoint and test them out. and then you can go ahead and build the artifact and send that to AWS Lambda or Google or Microsoft or wherever that's going. So it's important that people know that, because I've caught a couple people and said, nope, wait, you don't need to do that. So yeah. So this 2025 RC1 that just came out, what is the timeline for kind of SpringCloud 2025 as a release? Do we have kind of an end goal there?
Yeah, so we were just talking about this morning. Our GA release will be the end of May here. That's what we're shooting for.
Right on.
Yeah, we try to tend to follow what the Spring Boot GA release as soon as possible, because then we get a lot of people asking about when SpringCloud's going to be released.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Because I know every time Boot comes out, I hear the same questions on social media.
So Spring Boot does their releases on a Thursday, and we do our release either the Monday or Tuesday following. So as soon as they do it, and we were just talking too, this is an unusual year for us. This will be the first time in SpringCloud's history that we do 2 release trains in a single year. Typically, we only do 1, and that would be released at the end of the year. But we had some of the features that didn't make it into last year's release train were like almost ready and not quite, and so we decided to do this. Typically, what we would do is we would just have a service release with the May boot release, and then it would support 2 versions of SpringCloud.
Right.
But anyway, so...
and is this because of new Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4 coming in November? Like it needs
we wanted to get the features in before then. There are some things that we're deprecating and changing that we wanted to have those released prior to the major.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it'll be the first time that we have a .1. We'll have 2025.1, which will be a major. 2025.0 is a minor. So.
Oh, okay.
And then do you wait for Boot to like get a minor patch in, or is it like you're just waiting a couple of days for that to like settle?
No, they, like Spencer said, they release on Thursday, and we don't want to do that on Friday. So we wait till the next week just to
don't deploy to production on a Friday. Gotcha.
So the reason we don't like to do it on a Friday is because we have, what is it, Ryan, 17, 18 projects that we build in our release train. And very often, more often than we would like, the release takes more than 1 day. And if we started on a Friday, we would just stop until Monday anyway. So we just said, let's start on the Monday.
Can you explain that to our audience? Because I try to let people understand all of the work that goes into making sure that the Spring projects work for everybody, and that we have customers, we have an ecosystem that's using it in every way, shape, and form with all the versions. You said we could still use Java 8 on this library, so they're still using Java 8. Could you explain how massive the build infrastructure is for Spring?
So the Spring release train, we've had so many meetings about it, is it 2 or 3 weeks long? Yeah. So, and it starts at Micrometer, right? And then Reactor, because those are both inputs to Spring Framework. Then it's Spring Framework. And then every project that depends on Spring Framework that gets consumed by Spring Boot goes next. So Spring Security, data, all the other Spring things, batch, that are consumed by Boot go next. Then Spring Boot. And then we're not the only downstream project anymore. There's SpringCloud, Spring Modulith, and Spring AI are now all after Boot.
Yeah.
And so it's like a 3-week process from start to finish on the
It's
release
amazing.
train.
3 weeks. This is the difference between delivering a framework
And
and
ecosystem.
delivering an app, right? Yeah, we're delivering an ecosystem. 3 weeks.
And it's distributed. Like all of those things are different teams, different build systems, maybe different CI systems. It's crazy.
Now, what just crossed my mind?
And then, sorry, just to layer on top of that, there's like a whole hierarchy inside of the Spring Cloud umbrella, right?
Yeah.
Like we have our own order of which things need to be built first and released first, and then because they all depend, some of them depend on each other and stuff like that, so it gets even more fine-grained.
That, to me, would be a good talk. I would love to spend an hour just understanding the decision, because I like to use Spring Application Advisor, where I'm trying to get our customers to upgrade all the things. And a lot of times our customers have those interconnected dependency things that they're dealing with as well. And I think it would be a good talk to have, to lay out, like, hey, here's what our system looks like, and here's how it's being consumed. Because I think, not for a lot of orgs, but I think there's a few things that our audience would take out of that, in like, hey, here's how you build things. I think that'd be
I'd like
valuable.
to see AI figure that out.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, so there's a question here I see you guys answering, but any chance you could please share a link with code with local stack? Ryan's saying, we have some things in GitHub. 1 sec. So just for those listening, I'll make sure I go ahead and get those in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we use local stack in some of our unit tests, so I'm just gonna.
That search link I has all 3 places that we.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
We have integration tests. Pretty slick. We like local stack.
Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left, but I know you guys focus a lot on Spring Cloud. Anything else? We just talked about ecosystem. Anything in the Spring ecosystem that you've been kind of playing around with, taking a look at?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's talking about Spring AI lately in the Spring ecosystems.
What's AI?
I don't know.
Is that a thing?
It's this hot new thing. It's supposed to be cool. I don't know. So it's on our major release. It's something that we're going to be taking a look at from the Spring Cloud perspective. It'll give Spring AI a chance to GA first before that, and then we can start to think about how Spring Cloud plays into the AI space with many different aspects. Taking a look at MCP, which is really cool, and that kind of opens up a lot of different opportunities when you start talking about having multiple MCP servers and stuff like that, and also extracting information from some of these Spring Cloud projects in context of communicating with an AI. Like, we talked a lot about, like, DaShaun, you were bringing up, sorry, not DaShaun, Dan, you were bringing up, I always have to, like, it's always confusing me to figure out the configuration for my application. I have to hit this env endpoint. Well, I mean, you can imagine chatting with a language model and saying, can you tell me what the configuration is for this application?
Ooh.
What does it look like? So those are all kind of ideas that we've been kind of talking about and haven't, come to realization yet, but we have to get this minor release out and then start chatting and thinking about what other stuff we want to look at.
Yeah, it seems like from a Spring Cloud standpoint, as teams are working with all these distributed applications, there's definitely an opportunity there to, like, hey, give me some insight as to what's going on here, or tell me, is anything missing? That kind of providing that kind of chat experience across, like, a distributed application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just providing some additional insight, and, like, instead of having to know what endpoint you had to hit, or is it exposed properly? All this other stuff that we got to think about today, which is it's second nature to a lot of us, but for some people it's it's also it can be a little confusing, right? To know, which property source in this list of 6 property sources is taking priority, and I see this property 6 times here. Which one is the actual value?
Right.
So it can be, even for us, we have to go back, like you said, and look at the documentation. Like, remember, But to have that knowledge all kind of outsourced for you would be a lot easier.
Cool. Where's anybody going next? Anybody speaking anywhere soon? I know you were just in Greece, Spencer.
I mean, probably for us is Spring One in Vegas.
Woo!
Yep.
I'm crossing my fingers. I submitted 8 talks just to make sure I get one. I was like, I'm going to submit all the things.
You submitted 8, Dan. We're going to give you all 8. And you're going to do all the talking.
It's funny. I was joking with somebody about that the other day. Like, I did the same thing with Dev Connect. I was like, I'm just going to submit 6 talks. Hopefully 1 gets submitted and 4 got accepted. I'm like, oh,
whoops.
Didn't
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Hard, huh?
Yeah, who's in Barcelona? I'll be in Barcelona. I know I was talking to Adib and Josh will be there.
But bunch of the European Spring folks will be there.
I know Rawson's there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Jürgen's going to be there doing a keynote.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
So
he is. So if you're interested in Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4, nobody kind of breaks it down better than Jürgen. He's going to kind of give what's coming in spring, and I love those talks. So
I think Mark and Josh are going to be there too, doing the AI thing. Yeah,
maybe Christian too. I think Christian's doing a workshop. So this does segue really good into what is going to happen next week on Spring Office Hours. We have the great Sergey who runs Spring I/O. We will talk all about that, what's happening at Spring I/O. So make sure you show up on Monday and listen to that one. All right.
I got one more question. Spencer, Ryan, if you were to want feedback, if you had an audience, if you had some Spring developers that were out and they were looking for something cool to try out, what's one thing that you would love to get more feedback on? What's one thing that you wish more of our ecosystem was using to give you feedback? Tough question.
Yeah, it is a tough question. Because
we have an opportunity here. We have this nice channel. We have an amazing ecosystem, even our little community here in the Spring Office Hours, where we get a lot of good engagement. We get people that are trying out new things. And this is just your opportunity. Like, hey, if you want people to try out something new.
Yeah. I think like the gateway function stuff and stream stuff is going to be new, and I would love to get feedback on that, because actually we were just speaking a little bit about whether that takes away the need for like Spring Function Web, right? Spring Cloud Function Web, right? When you have everything sitting in front of a gateway, do you need that anymore? And so we're like, well, maybe we do, maybe we don't, or there's a lot of things we're unsure about that stuff. But yeah, that would be one piece of feedback. And I think like we were talking about, we had a discussion about configuration, where do you store it and all that stuff. And I think if you have strong opinions about, different repositories that you want to be supported, or different combinations of repositories that you need to be supported and stuff like that would also be useful to us. Or of something that's, you would like to see us support out of the box, that we don't currently, that would be awesome as well. That's also great stuff going into a major. Try to include.
Yeah, I would go along with that. Like, there's basically 4 of us full time on Spring Cloud, and so there's a lot of open issues and open pull requests, and to see, I take signals that people like, hey, has there been any movement on this? We need this, right? I love those kind of, like, I feel bad because we can't, there's so many issues out there and pull requests that we can't get to all of them. And so when people are active on them, whether that's just voting or commenting or whatever, thumbs up, like, I want this. I appreciate that a lot.
So if you're looking for something, go look for the pull request. And if there's a pull request and that looks like, oh yeah, I could use that, give it a thumbs up.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think people take this for granted, but like, you guys are a small team working on a lot of different projects, and like, you guys lay out a roadmap and a plan for which one to build into Spring Cloud. but like feedback from people using this is very important because you can't see like every path that this is going to take and every use case that customers need. So it is important to get those issues in, whether it's a bug or a feature request saying, hey, this is great, but I'd really like to use it this way. Don't be afraid to submit those because the team is reviewing those. And that is an important part of, the open source software community. So cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Ryan and Spencer, we really appreciate it. And we'll have to get you back on soon. Love chatting with you guys.
Thanks for having us.
All right, I will get all of your kind of contact info, anywhere you want to be found on the internet, and I'll get that in the show notes in case you want to go ahead and talk to them. And again, make sure you check out the SpringCloud repos over on GitHub if you want to check out any of the issues or open a new one. It's a good place to do so. With that, gentlemen, thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.